My name is Carly Borelli, and today I'm going to be talking about the stigma against mental illness in the yellow wallpaper and today. Introduction. In the yellow wallpaper, the narrator's husband, John, does not believe his wife is actually sick. The yellow wallpaper was a short story published in 1892. Back then, people did not believe in mental illnesses and tried to ignore them. Today, society acknowledges mental illnesses more than it did back then, but in this presentation, I'm going to argue how mental illnesses are still not treated like physical illnesses. In her short story, Gilman shows the effects of mental illnesses and how they are treated. Postpartum anxiety. From the very beginning of the story, the narrator talks about how her husband does not think her illness is real. John diagnoses her with nervous depression, but I think she actually had postpartum anxiety. In Dana Najjar's article, You've Heard of Postpartum Depression, but Probably Not Postpartum Anxiety, she talks about her own experience with postpartum anxiety, and I believe that some of her symptoms match up with the narrator's. Najjar states that common factors in all cases of postpartum anxiety are paralyzing worry, often accompanied by the inability to eat, sleep, function in any meaningful way, and most critically, to connect with an infant. Throughout the yellow wallpaper, the narrator typically does not have much of an appetite, naps during the day because she does not sleep at night, and does not care for the house or baby in any way. When she talks about her baby, she states, "I cannot be with him. It makes me so nervous." It is normal to be nervous after having a baby, but it is not normal to be so nervous that it affects the person's daily life and they are unable to be around their child. Hiding mental illness. John takes his wife to a colonial mansion 3 miles from the village because he says it will be a good place for her to recover. But I don't believe that. Instead, I believe he was trying to hide her and her illness from the rest of the world in an attempt to protect his status. He was a doctor, and he would have been wealthy and held a high status in society. Therefore, he did not want people to think she had gone crazy and associate him with marrying a crazy lady because that would be frowned upon. The only time he lets her see anyone besides his sister, who takes care of the house and baby because his wife couldn't, was for the 4th of July. Although he says going to this house will help her get better, he really does it to protect his ego and his precious status, because back then, men made the rules and women followed their orders. Physical symptoms of mental illness. One of the most powerful quotes from this story is, "John does not know how much I really suffer. He knows there is no reason to suffer, and that satisfies him." I believe the narrator was actually showing physical symptoms of mental illness, but John ignored them and only saw what he wanted to see. According to the American Psychiatric Association, some of the warning signs of mental illnesses are nervousness, unusual behavior, sleep or appetite changes, withdrawal, and illogical thinking. Despite the narrator not being able to sleep at night, not having much of an appetite, and being too nervous to be around her own baby, her husband does not believe there's anything wrong with her. Just because signs and symptoms of mental illnesses are not always as obvious as symptoms of physical illnesses does not mean that their suffering is not as real as people that have physical illnesses. Common treatment methods. With the right treatment methods, the narrator's disease could have been managed properly. John had her taking a couple of different medications, which is typical with mental illnesses, although not all mental illnesses have to be treated with medication. Psychotherapy is another common treatment for mental illnesses. According to Mental Health Treatments, psychotherapy explores thoughts, feelings, and behaviors and seeks to improve an individual's well-being. John failed to use this method at all, which is upsetting because it really could have been beneficial to the narrator. Not seeking treatment makes mental illnesses worse. This is evident in the yellow wallpaper because John never wants to talk to his wife about her illness. He thinks he knows what is best for her and does not let her make any decisions. He even tells her that the worst thing to do is to think about her condition, which is ironic because by trying to ignore her condition, it actually got worse. Conclusion. The stigma against mental illnesses is present throughout all of the yellow wallpaper. People still try to hide their mental illnesses, just like when John took his wife to that house 3 miles away from the village. He ignored her physical symptoms and did not believe she was actually sick. He loved her and tried to help her, but she needed more help than he could give her. Even though mental illnesses are quite common, people do not like to discuss them because it makes them uncomfortable. It was apparent it made John uncomfortable because he never lets the narrator talk about her mental illness and even told her not to think about it. He believes that thinking and talking about it would make her condition worse when really it would have helped her improve and get better. People do not think that mental illnesses are that big of a deal, but really it impacts a person's daily life. I believe this story brings awareness to the stigma about mental illnesses and should make people realize that they need to be more accepting of mental illnesses because mental illnesses should be treated just like any other illness. Here's my sources.